Welcome back. Scanning film is an interesting topic to tackle. There's a lot of ways to do it, a lot of preferences that a lot of people have. For instance, do you get your film scanned at the lab? Do you do it at home? What kind of scanner is your lab using? What kind of scanner are you using? Are you using a flatbed, using a DSLR? Is your lab touching up your photos? There's so many factors at play that it can be kind of hard to decide what the best option is for you. So what I wanted to do today was take a bit of my own personal experimentation and document that for you guys so you can get an idea of some possible examples and hopefully help make the decision process easier. About a year ago, I took the plunge into DSLR scanning, and frankly, I haven't looked back since. My K1 DSLR scanning setup has been outstanding for the past year I've been using it, and as I've gotten to learn it more, it's become more and more capable. But after a photo walk with Perfect Image Camera over in Lancaster, PA here, they offered me a free roll getting developed and scanned, and I figured I'd give their premium scans a shot. They have a Noritsu and a FujiFilm Frontier scanning setup, which was really cool to see. They had a zine launch recently where we got a chance to take a look at their full lab and see these scanners in action, which was a really cool experience. Having seen their setup, it inspired me to put all these scanners to the test, and I figured that I would document my results and share them with all of you. As we go through them, I do want to remind you guys all that I have this video's companion page on my website. It'll be linked here or below or wherever. Just take a look for the link to the companion page, and that'll get you all of the full-size scans, the full roll. I'm only going to highlight a couple photos here, so going through the full roll, you'll be able to see everything and compare it for yourselves in the full size without any YouTube compression, or look at it on your big monitor at home as opposed to on your phone in the toilet on your lunch break at work. A quick little FYI, on the site I have them separated by scanner type, so it's all the same roll, all the same photos, just separated by scanner and with as much detail as I can provide as far as settings go. And you might notice if you're looking there is a fourth scanner, the Agfa D processor. That is the processor and scanner used by the Camera Center of York, my usual shop, and I decided to throw their hat in the ring as well to see, as I believe that their unit is a little more common than the Noritsus and the Frontiers, as well as being much more affordable. So that's something we'll touch on later. As I said, I did pick out a few shots that I think were the best looking ones. The camera I used for this was my Leica M3 with the dual range Summicron 50 f2. So really high quality glass through a good camera, though it does have some exposure issues, and you'll see that if you look at the roll. I picked out the best shots that kind of show the harsher contrasts, and honestly some of those more difficult shots do show what these scanners are capable of handling. Say if you have extreme light leaks or any camera issues, how recoverable the image may be. First off, I have this shot here, my buddy Austin, with the camera pointed at the light, and don't worry, I didn't have it there too long. The shutter curtain is fine. We can see here there's a pretty significant difference between all four of the shots immediately. The Agfa photo came out much cooler, and the Frontier one came out a lot softer and warmer, whereas the DSLR and the Noritsu seem pretty in line actually, and there may be a reason for that. Like most photographers, I convert my DSLR scans using Negative Lab Pro. I've tried doing it manually, it's just much easier to do it this way. And when doing the inversion, I stick with the Noritsu color model, and I did so for this test because that's typically what I use. There is an NLP standard setting, however I use the Noritsu profile for all of mine. I just found in my initial wave of testing it to be the most pleasing, so I stuck with that for this test. However, going forward, I kept everything in NLP neutral or standard, and I'll have all that information on screen so you can see the settings that I stuck with for the entire roll. Now with these lab scans here, I didn't touch them at all. I just went through and got them straight from the lab. Both labs, they have their own process for sending you the files. Both were simple and easy to use, and the files were large enough in size that they were workable. All the Agfa files came in at 3000 by 2000 resolution. The Noritsus were 6074 by 4092 exactly, and the Frontier was 5444 by 3649. DSLR scans floated around that 6000 by 4000 range depending on how they were cropped. So all pretty similar on resolution. The only one that lags behind here is the Agfa. However, I don't think that that's much of a huge deterrent. When I switched over to using my DSLR scanning setup, I had previously been using a Canon flatbed, and I think that I almost tricked myself into thinking that lab scans were comparable to my Canon because the jump from the flatbed to the DSLR was huge. But now looking at these lab scans, they're holding a candle to what the DSLR scanner setup can do. I think I underestimated lab scans from the jump. With that though, if you want to go for prints, the Frontier and the Agfa both lag a little behind, one more than the other, and I wouldn't be as confident making bigger, larger prints on the Frontier or the Agfa as I would something like the Noritsu or the DSLR scanner that just have a higher resolution to begin with. Especially on 35, you run the risk of showing pixels in those final scans. That being said, how many photographers are actually blowing up their scans to wall-size prints or even medium to large prints? I would be less confident of a wall-size print from the Frontier as I would a Noritsu, and I think that I would trust my DSLR scanning just a little bit more personally. Like I said, you can take a look at the files for yourselves. Something else I wanted to compare was how these scanners compile underexposure with film. Something that I really like to do is having a subject in silhouette with the background blown out behind them. Well, not blown out, but exposed, leaving the subject underexposed and in shadow. And it's something I've gotten pretty good at doing in camera and have figured out how to edit around with my DSLR scanning setup. So I'm curious how these scanners hold up to that. Here I intentionally underexpose the foreground and the subject to leave things more interpretive. And the DSLR scan, in my opinion, lets through just enough detail to let you know what's going on. That being said, this is what I'm used to working with. The Agfa as well, that's the shadows fall into a very nice cool tone, and it strikes a darker shadow. But the Frontier, with its generally softer interpretation, brightens up a lot of those shadows a lot more than I would have liked. And of course, these things can fairly easily be edited out properly or to compensate. However, that can come at the expense of the remainder of the photo. Something else that I think is really important to highlight here is we're seeing a lab tech's interpretation of these photos. For those unfamiliar with the scanning process, after your film gets developed and you say you get lab scans, there is a technician that's going through and color correcting and modifying and adjusting as these shots are getting scanned and digitized. This isn't the direct interpretation. There really is no true interpretation of film unless you're looking directly at the negative. Anything that you can do with it to get it positive is an interpretive work. So when you boil down to it, the process of scanning is the process of editing. And what I'm trying to compare here is as close to the base as possible. But these scans have been touched up by lab technicians. And I think they did a great job with them. I mean, all these shots I think look good in their own right. The question is, what's the preference for me? And the thing is, you can take scans from the Frontier and make them look like the Noritsu, or from this and make them look like that with careful editing. Sometimes they'll naturally lead towards one another too. This photo of the two people on the bench, I think looks best on the Noritsu. I think it nailed the colors, just enough detail in the foreground trees and with the couple well brightened up in the background. On the DSLR scan, which until this point has been my preferred scanning, comes out softer and more similar to the Fuji Frontier. And I know for a fact I can edit this to incorporate more contrast. In fact, here it is with just added a bit of contrast, hair on the dial, and Negative Lab Pro to increase the lights and bring it more flat. It's not an easy task to express how important how your film gets digitized is, especially to new photographers who might be looking at pretty substantial expenses when it comes down to scanning. Film was made to be interpreted and looked at and understood in a physical space. A new era of digital interpretation of film has brought on all sorts of new techniques that are not what the medium was traditionally designed around and had been designed around for 100 years. For better or for worse, this is something, though, I like to highlight in my scanning setup is getting it as close to the darkroom process as possible. I use an enlarger lens on a set of macro bellows, and I try to treat it as though I'm making a darkroom print. However, instead of dodging and burning and adjusting timing through the printing paper, I do it in Lightroom. I will touch more on my process in another video. I have some thoughts that I want to share on that, and hopefully help some people out who might be interested in putting together a scanning rig, as I know how complicated that process can be. Something else to acknowledge is these scanners have different methods of getting their color detail. The Frontier has its cyan, yellow, and magenta filters. The Noritsu uses RGB filters. The Agfa has a litany of filters that it cycles between. Actually pretty cool. I'm hopefully showing some footage of that now. What I believe to be most important is how much color data is getting carried over into the digital workspace. I am not an expert in sensitometry. I'm looking at you like I didn't write the words, or whatever the digital equivalent of that may be. So I'm sure there is some inherent benefits to these systems that use color filters to get different color detail, but at the end of the day, the editing is out of your hands with a lot of these scanners. You're getting a JPEG back, not a raw file, without that color data anymore. I find that the DSLR scanning setup gives you a lot more flexibility and a lot more involvement in your work. Whereas the lab scans will come in as PNGs or JPEGs, and they are high quality, but they're less involved as an artist. You are not having a direct hand in what's happening with your work in that regard. And I know there's an argument to be made for how things are developed and what developer they use and so on and so forth, and machines and processing and timing and all those things and agitation. But that is really minutia. And if you're really paranoid about that, you're probably developing film in your bathroom and not even thinking about your scanner setup because you have some drum scanner in your basement. So I watched a video recently by Nicholas Arnold, great name. It's talking about what makes a photo sharp, to hopefully not surmise his video improperly, but it's less about clinical perfect sharpness and more about the interpretation of the photo. It doesn't need to be perfect. I think a lot of us try to perfect what we're working on because we're passionate about it. At least I hope so. I mean, if you're sitting watching me ramble about this, you probably have a bit of passion, just a little bit. So I asked, do your photos need to be scanned perfectly? Yeah, they do. It's important. But what is the definition of perfect in this case? All of these scanners provided a high quality image, and it really boils down to preference and effort. I think if anyone takes enough time to ensure and care that their film is getting a high quality scan, I don't think that there's a reason to make a change, especially if you're pleased with the results you're getting. Don't let some DSLR scanning purist, absolutist like me tell you otherwise if you're perfectly content with your lab scans. It's similar to developing your film at home. I developed my film at home for a number of years, and it was really the most reliable option I had. There wasn't any labs local, and I was trying to save money, as well as I enjoyed having the control over the process. I like developing my black and white in D76, and labs generally don't do that. However, relocated and found a lab that does develop in D76 for black and white and has quick turnaround time and uses high quality developer. And now I don't worry about it. I took the time and effort to make sure I was getting what I wanted, and now I trust that that part of the process is out of my hand. And that's all right. I have the means to DSLR scan, and I like how much it involves me in the process. But that isn't what we're trying to determine today. We're trying to figure out which of these scanners is, if any, are objectively the best. And honestly, if you're watching this video this long, you've probably figured out what your preference is, and stick with that. You're probably right. Trust your gut. If you'd like me to expound on it, though, some more, the true answer is that it depends. If I was shooting 1, 2, 3 rolls a year, lab scans. I shoot 1, 2, 3, 5 rolls a week, more if I'm going on a trip or running some tests. And those costs add up. The premium scans at Perfect Image were $20 each. Luckily, I had a coupon for one, so thank you guys. The scans at the camera center run around $6 to $7. You're getting a little lesser of a product for a much lower price. That being said, if you're just posting on social media, these are perfectly fine. Probably better than what you need, honestly. Considering my output, my DSLR scanner has been crucial in my process. in part too because being involved with my work in a more hands-on manner has helped me identify where I need to improve and where I need to do better, as opposed to just looking at a file that I get from an email and being able to pick out a few bad ones. I have to go through, and that picture has gone through the process, and now I got to figure out why I messed that one shot up, or usually more than one. Yes, this process does take me more time, but it also helps me value my work more as well. Others may have their time more pressed. You may not have as much time to sit and spend an hour scanning film in. And in that case, lab scans are perfectly okay. I mean, they're okay in any case, but that's a valid reason to not want to do it yourself. Time is valuable. There's a lot of hype online about Fuji Frontiers and Noritsus and setting them up at home and these hype photographers who have these crazy scanning setups. And I think that is a little excessive. I don't want anyone to walk away from this thinking they need to buy a Fuji Frontier, one of those massive desk things from the late 90s that are all yellowed and gross, and the keypad, and do not do that. That's not necessary. I also want to point out that I am aware that there is a number of variables to all of this. The lab techs that were working on my film, my scanning setup, the camera I use has a little bit of a shutter issue. Exposures might not be perfect. It could have been a little too sunny and the screen might have looked different. There's so many different things that could be affecting this. So I don't want anyone to take this as a true scientific comparison or test. This is just one person's personal experience and test that I wanted to share with you guys. Like I said, you can take a look for yourself at my website. All of the full-size images are there. I've also got some ideas in the work for doing a video going into more of my DSLR scanning setup and how that works and how I invert my negatives and so on and so forth. So stick around for that. I appreciate if you subscribe, if you comment, if you like, if you just click the share button. I think it gives me some help here. A little FYI, I'm a photographer out of Pennsylvania and trying to share some more of my work. I really enjoy talking ad nauseum about this stuff. So if you're into this, stick around and see what's up. Also, for those of you that might have caught it, been trying to highlight and document some more repair stuff that I've been doing at the Camera Center of York in those shorts. So let me know what you think of those as well. Look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. Have a good one. Hold on. Hold it. What do you guys think of the Sox jersey? Isn't that sweet? It was an awesome thrift find. We ain't got that little last bit out of this little fucking dumb. Sorry, headphone Nick.